Hello there, friends. Let's discuss one of the most fascinating parts of the spiritual life, the science of breathlessness. In the astrology chart, the breath is shown by the presence of Rahu and Ketu. Rahu is inhalation, and it brings an upward current in the spine. Ketu is exhalation, brings the energy back down the spine. And this is always happening. So how do we get the breath to calm completely so that we can enter into the inner channel of the spine in which breathlessness is the natural result? This innermost channel is known as the Sushumna. And when we are breathing, we're normally breathing in channels known as the Irda, that is Rahu, the upward, and Pingala, that is Ketu, the exhalation and downward current. So Rahu is forward movement in your life, that which will expand your consciousness and free you from dependence on the small past of the ego. It's relying at this time on what it thinks it knows due to Ketu, which is the past. But Rahu has challenges that will show that person that they don't know everything. And this Rahu, this represents actually our inner freedom. When we learn to surrender what we're holding on to in those more difficult areas of life, we also learn how to surrender our need to breathe. This has to do with your attachment to the ego, which is the moon in the chart. The moon carries shadows, and those are Rahu and Ketu in your chart. So what we're saying is that the moon itself is afflicted by these shadows most of the time. But if we're able to release those things that we think are ours, including our own sense of self, and this has to be done through devotion. It cannot be possible without us loving something more than the little ego. And this is why life challenges us and can really beat the ego around. And if we respond with the egoic attachment to Ketu, this is how I've always done it, or to Rahu, which is imagining that we know what the future is going to hold and we're rejecting it cold, then these shadows will continue to disturb us, and we will never be able to go breathless into the higher states of meditation. So I hope you can see I'm trying to illustrate how our outer tests and challenges that make us scream inside to the point where we think we're just going to cling to this no matter what. We're going to cling to this desire or to this anxiety. But the day will come when we realize we're making ourselves miserable by holding on. And it is when we let go of that which we're fearing that the Kundalini power in the base chakra can then begin to come up with our inhalations. And this is us being able to surrender our attachments. This is the science of freedom and the science that leads to breathlessness. We have to have a love for God that's deeper than self. And we need to have the ability to release what we're holding on to. And these things will come into play when you do your Kriya Yoga or inner meditation practice. You'll see that the breathlessness state only reaches the threshold. You won't go through that door into Samadhi unless there's an inner surrender of self, of the ego. And this is people kill themselves because life gets very hard. But what if life gets hard, which it will for all of us, and we respond differently to that by saying, well, then I give myself up. This is a healthier form of suicide, is giving yourself to God's will. And it will improve your life in ways that you cannot at this time even conceive. But it's a trustworthy presence, and this is the presence of the sun, There's a difference between the moon and the sun in our sky. The moon is always fluctuating and waning and waxing, and only is fulfilled for a brief moment every month. That's your ego. But if you live for God's will, you'll find a stability of your every day, no matter what tests, challenges, or blessings come. We can remain evenly peaceful and in love with the one that does not change, that does not fluctuate. That would be the sunlight ever steadily shining. So this is the cosmology of it, is that the moon, our ego, is offering itself to the sun to be charged, to be empowered by that ever steady light. And thus, that moon, that character, that ego, they'll be able then to illuminate the darkness of other moons, of other dark egoic nights happening here in creation. And this is a great blessing to be able to reach out and liberate and lift up another. And this also leads us to that sense of inner knowing that God's presence is all that's real. As he moves through you more and more, you become astounded, really, by the brilliance that God is when the ego's been peeled away. And this is also how we enter breathlessness, is by bringing the energy up without holding on to ourself. We're bringing it up and we're saying with all our being, I want only God's will. And if God's will is to take me out of the body into samadhi, my love for him will help me to surrender and trust that process. I've known people who've gone into the breathless state. One of them was Brother Dharmananda, and he was, I spent several meditations in his presence, and they were some of the most unforgettable experiences that I ever had. And he would go into a state of unresponsiveness, so he would exit into the light and be completely still. And it was his forgetfulness of himself, his love for Divine Mother, that allowed this process to happen. But if you asked Brother, how did you do it? How did you go through the spiritual eye? He'd say he didn't know. He would say that it was Master who took him through. It's the love of God and Guru, ultimately, that helps. We need to love that will, that purpose, that presence more than the little moody moon, which has its fantasies about the future, which will probably never come true. It's God's will. He knows what your soul needs and what will fulfill you. And when your trust is there, then when you enter into a deep state, you can be guided by him and not freak out that you're not breathing. It's a very subtle science to go breathless. Another very important element is the cleanliness of our body. We need to eat natural whole foods that haven't been destroyed with hot oils and fatty, unnatural things and flours and sugars, refined sugars. These things totally toxify our bloodstream, and that makes it impossible to stop the breath. So cleanliness of diet is, in my opinion, an essential element. However, I'd like to just mention that Brother Dharmananda was over 300 pounds and in a wheelchair at the end of his life when I had those meditations with him, where he was going breathless into samadhi. So his love for God was more than self, and this transcended the physical body. So apparently, if your devotion and your dedication is complete, that those food elements of going breathlessness seem to matter less. But my experience is that the cleaner the inner mechanism, the easier it is to calm the breath. So the science of the food thing and the cleaning of the body, it's extremely important for you. If your devotion is not yet completely ecstatic, this will help your devotion to deepen, to calm your breath. and it will help your mind to work better and your interactions with your karma to go more smoothly. Yogananda said, even-minded and cheerfulness. This leads you to the goal most quickly. So I personally am a big emphasizer of raw foods, natural vegan foods that come from nature. And I found that served my spiritual life in a magnificent way over the last 15 or 18 years or something. And it does really help with the depth of Kriya Yoga Pranayama, to have an empty belly, to have an empty bowel, to not have a whole bunch of food still needing to break down and move out of your body. That makes you breathe really heavily. That's the science of why we have to keep breathing, is because our blood isn't clean. And the oxygen helps the heart and brain to do their work and to purify the blood. And there's a whole science to this, but it does connect to the Rahu Ketu in your chart, which shows your breath. And when your faith and love for God is deep enough, which your challenges will catalyze this inner depth, then what you'll find is that the conquering of that future need to know and the settling of that in faith, the settling of our anxiety in faith in God, this helps dissolve Rahu, and thus our need to keep breathing and affirming ego consciousness becomes less so. So all of these elements work together, and I have them written down, and I'll just review in closing. One is our diet. We want to keep that clean and alkalize the body, and to remove unnatural, man-made processed foods. And then Rahu Ketu are in the chart, and Rahu shows our anxiety, and that's our need to keep breathing. It correlates with that. And when our faith is perfect in Divine Mother, due to us having experienced her grace in challenge after challenge, then we'll really be able to trust her on that journey into the light, which does include an ego death, a stopping of the breath, and an exiting of the body. Very scary things if you don't have trust in that vehicle of the Guru, of the grace of God, which manifests as the Guru. And then our love and devotion for God needs to be so much that there's barely any even remembrance that we're a separate being. This is a sign that we have loved God more than self. And you can test this at 4 a.m. if you wake up and decide that you want to go back to sleep, but then think, do I love God more than sleep? Let me spend a few minutes at least with Him to show myself that I do. These are very good steps to take. So the Rahu Ketu show the breath in the chart. They also show our future challenges. And when we're able to surrender to God with love and devotion, and also keep a clean, controlled, food-consuming machine, the physical body, then all these things work together to help our Kriya Yoga practice, which is pranayama, designed to help us go into higher states of awareness of God's presence. All of these things work together to bring a lot of grace and help, and breathlessness can indeed become a reality for us. As Yogananda says, breathlessness is deathlessness. It leads us back to the memory that we are immortal souls made in the image of a great, great being that we call God or Creator. Thank you for listening today, and good luck with your breathlessness journey. Remember, it's all in your surrender to the divine. She or he will guide the way, and that Rahu will be dissolved when your faith is perfect in God's will. Jai Guru, Jai Ma, Om.